Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because, well, we're diving into a mystery you've probably noticed in your own life, or maybe in your friends or your kids. We're going to investigate why it feels like an entire generation is just losing its ability to focus, right? I mean, that's the common narrative we hear all the time, that our attention spans are practically shrinking to zero and nobody can concentrate anymore. But what if that whole story is actually missing the much bigger picture?
And that brings us to the central mystery we are going to unravel today. Are we actually losing our ability to focus, or are our brains simply adapting to an incredibly fast-paced, high-tech world? I want to hook you immediately with this idea. We really shouldn't be framing the shift in attention as a deficit or some kind of cognitive failure. Instead, we need to look at it as an ongoing, incredibly profound biological and technological adaptation. Seriously, our minds are changing because our world is changing.
All right, let's jump into part one, deep versus hyperattention. Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp exactly how our minds are shifting and to understand this generational divide, we can look at some fascinating cognitive research by N. Catherine Hales. She outlines this stark contrast between two very different cognitive modes. On one side, you have traditional deep attention. Think of this as the foundation of traditional education. Picture a college student, curled up, completely lost in a massive Victorian novel for hours on end. They're locked into a single stream of information, and they've got a super high tolerance for boredom. But on the flip side, we have hyperattention. Imagine that student's younger sibling sitting in front of a console, blasting through a fast-paced video game, maybe with a YouTube video playing on a tablet right next to them. They're rapidly switching their focus across multiple streams, they are actively seeking out high levels of stimulation, and crucially, they have almost zero tolerance for boredom.
Which leads us right into part two, the multitasking generation.
Now, this isn't just some casual, anecdotal observation. There is hard behavioral evidence showing a massive shift, and honestly, the scale of it is staggering. Research from the Kaiser Family Foundation looked at what they dubbed Generation M. These are young people between 8 and 18. The data breaks down their daily media consumption. And what's absolutely incredible here is that these kids managed to pack 8.5 hours of media consumption into just 6.5 actual hours of real time. How is that even physically possible? Well, through rapid task alternation, basically what we all call multitasking. They are seamlessly constantly bouncing between TV, music, and the web, completely immersing themselves in this high-stimulation environment. Now get this, out of those 8.5 hours, guess how much time is dedicated to reading print media? Just 0.43 hours. That's traditional deep attention reading, and it now accounts for a remarkably tiny fraction of a young person's daily leisure time. It's basically a rounding error. They aren't just picking different things to watch or read, they're actively choosing a fundamentally different cognitive mode.
Let's move to part three, the search for stimulation. So, you're probably asking, why is this happening? We always hear about the explosive rise in ADHD diagnoses, right? Well, child psychiatrist Les Linnett offers this truly fascinating reframe. He suggests that maybe we shouldn't just look at ADHD as a simple failure to focus. Instead, it might actually be a brain's desperate biological search for stimulation. Think about it for a second. The primary medication for ADHD is Ritalin. Ritalin isn't a tranquilizer. It's literally a cortical stimulant. It's wild to think about, right? Linnett argues that these kids act as if their nervous systems have this invisible shield up. To them, normal, everyday classroom stimulation is felt as agonizing physical boredom. So what looks to a teacher like classic misbehavior, fidgeting, staring out the window, chatting with friends, is actually a biological drive. They are just trying to find the high input their brains deeply crave just to stay engaged.
Let's dig deeper in part four, rewiring the plastic brain. To really grasp why this intense need for stimulation is increasing, we have to pop the hood and look at the biology. Human brains are amazingly plastic, especially when we're young. We are born with these nervous systems that are ready to be literally, physically reconfigured by our surroundings. And this happens through a biological process called synaptogenesis. Think of it like a master gardener pruning a tree. The neural connections that we actively use, they get strengthened, they grow, but the ones we ignore, they just decay and disappear. It's literally use it or lose it. The brain perfectly optimizes itself for whatever environment it happens to find itself in.
So the crucial point is this. Children growing up in today's media-rich environments literally have brains that are wired differently from those who grew up in the print-dominated worlds of the past. Hyperattention isn't a broken brain. It's a brain working exactly as it was designed to. It is a highly successful physical, biological adaptation to a high-speed, information-dense world. A world where quickly processing multiple streams of data is highly, highly rewarded.
Which brings us to part 5, the algorithmic environment.
But obviously, that high-speed environment didn't just magically appear out of thin air. We have to look at the technological insights of researcher Kate Crawford to see what's actually driving this constant need for stimulation. Because guys, this isn't just about kids watching a little too much TV. We are living inside a massive, extractive, planetary architecture of artificial intelligence. And this brilliantly illustrates Crawford's point. AI isn't just some ethereal, invisible code floating in the cloud. No, it is a vast, physical industry driven by some of the wealthiest corporations in human history. And it is all perfectly designed to capture our data and, most importantly, coordinate and capture human attention on a planetary scale.
These algorithmic systems function almost like modern empires, and they operate in a few very specific steps to keep us totally hooked. First off, they abstract our incredibly complex world and our messy human behaviors into readable, sortable data. Second, they optimize their models purely for engagement. They literally just want to keep you clicking, scrolling, and watching for as long as possible. And third, they actively intervene in human time. These algorithms are the true architects of our media-rich environments. They are actively demanding our hyperattention, and they are constantly supplying that escalating stimulation that our plastic, adaptable brains are now craving.
Because of this, Crawford argues that we absolutely cannot look at these AI systems as neutral, harmless tools. She states, "Artificial intelligence, in the process of remapping and intervening in the world, is politics by other means." What she means by that is that AI systems are actually structures of power. They are intentionally designed to serve the dominant interests of the tech industry by extracting our absolute most precious resources, our time, our data, and our focus. Make no mistake, they are actively shaping the cognitive habits of an entire generation, just to optimize their own systems.
So finally, part 6, adapting to the shift. So where does all of this leave us? We have biological synaptogenesis colliding head-on with the computational power of planetary AI. If hyperattention is here to stay, and it sure looks like it is, how do we actually harness it constructively? Interestingly enough, video games provide a pretty brilliant blueprint. You see, games successfully capture hyperattention, not just by using flashy graphics, but through genuine interactivity. They activate our dopamine cycles by offering this escalating series of rewards. But more importantly, they foster a real sense of autonomy, and they require active, critical learning in order for the player to progress. They prove that hyperattention absolutely does not have to mean shallow learning. It just requires a totally different structuring of engagement.
And this means our traditional institutions, especially in education, are standing at a massive crossroads. Do we stubbornly try to change the hyperattentive student, forcing them to somehow fit the old, deep attention environment? Or do we do the opposite and change the environment to fit the student? Well, some experiments in higher education are already trying that second option. Imagine an interactive classroom using something called back-channeling. This is where students are typing out a running commentary and debating each other on a shared visible screen, all while the professor's speaking. It actually bridges the gap. It allows for the rapid switching of hyperattention, but it still points all that energy toward a shared, deep intellectual goal.
Which leaves us with this final, absolutely vital question. Are we going to keep trying to force hyperattentive minds back into deep attention boxes, medicating them and penalizing them when they inevitably don't fit? Or will we step up and redesign our educational systems, our workplaces, and our world to actually fit the incredible, highly adaptable brains we are currently building? The biology and the technology, they've already made their shift. It is entirely up to us to decide how we design our future around them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this completely changes how you look at your own attention.